Brain police. Yeah, I basically agree with you. I mean, the nihilism that, you know, I, what I'm going to call them singular objectivists because there's so many meanings to the word, you know, objective, and I have to use the word object and stuff. But people that believe there's sort of could only be one correct morality or none. Those people are what they interpret relativism. Now it's just funny. There's a lot of like heretics from dogmatism that adopt the rhetoric of anti-dogmatism, but they're still focused on the dogmatism. They're still unbelieving like one morality rather than seeing that there's many. From the relativist and skeptic point of view, we're like, hey, look, there's all these moralities. Look, you can't resolve them to one. Some of them resolve one. Some facts resolve down to, oh, just one true fact. But other ones don't, and those one true facts are transformable into other facts from other frames of reference. You know, something simultaneous might not be simultaneous, and all of these kinds of transformations of connection between everything. But and everything's there, and it's saying how everything is. It's like there's all these moralities, and the singular objectivist is like, what? There's no morality? No, there's thousands of them. I just can't believe there's no morality. You don't think there's a child in the hospital is is suffering? I do believe that. As a matter of fact, I can hardly think of a moral system, uh, a real one that isn't just like a construct that doesn't pretty much disvalue and not endorse suffering children. I guess it depends. Christianity has, I guess there's a lot about beating children, so maybe it's the other way around. Maybe most systems believe in the beating, but me personally, yeah, I think that's even in the four or five different kinds of system that I feel some affinity to. Yeah, they're all really clear on that. So there's all of them. Okay, but on the other issue, the issue it's manyfold, but I look at it this way. If you want to talk about, there's a, as soon as you put mathematics to any of these things, even metaphorically, then there's certain kinds of symmetry that come in. So basically, it's like light and dark. Okay, they're related. One has substance. It could be that dark was the substance, could be that light is the substance, right? But in either case, there's a material definition for both. Any amount of light in grayscale, it's some shade of gray. Okay, so it's a mixture of whichever is the material, and empty space. Okay, now I tend to think that the material uh, thing, there is a particular, like in the case of light and dark, we look there's photons. There's some darkotrons that we could see. They seem to be absent. So by our definitions of absence and law of identity, the things that exist, being themselves, are the photons and the light. But there's sometimes, in in conceptual matters that it's kind of arbitrary. You can put whichever one is the material thing that you sort of measure from. You're choosing which concept to measure from. Now, if you measure from suffering, that's fine, and I see that's a good way, especially to figure out a minimalist, like what should you really do, like for example, going to the moon, but not stopping war or getting clean water in Africa or something. There are sometimes looking at the suffering, you say, listen, we need to eliminate the suffering. Okay, but even in a system like that, where politically just talking that language will frame the debate and make you focus on that side of things, mathematically, again, just even metaphorically, you still can describe light. He's put the photons of misery and happiness on the suffering side, but then there's still such a thing as a lack of that until there's, no suffering. But since our suffering becomes very small, if not none, people are still like, oh, I stubbed my toe. So you can get better and better and figure out how to never stub your toe. in principle, but it seems pretty asymptotic. So you have a mathematics to describe why that's always better and better, all the way up into the great pleasures, and I'm already really happy. Why should I be happier? Because the misery, because when I get into this happier state, there's a material reality to the misery I would have felt if I was still at this state. So once I get here, inductively, I know if I go there, then I'll have this, you know what I mean? So even if there's nothing positive in the getting there, mathematically in the system, it still explains to the same thing. So I just choose to, well, you know what, I guess what I do with the body does, the more I've been thinking about it, I had opposed joy and misery, and I don't believe that, because you can have joy and misery at the same time. I think they're two different mental systems for two sides of the same coin. It's as if we have one part of our brain to look at one side of the coin and another part of the brain to look at the other side of the coin. And so, and maybe even Gary has convinced me, because it's certainly in the last couple of years that I've realized that. So there is a material component to suffering. And I always kind of believed in my own case, enduring suffering, in other people's cases, trying to eliminate suffering. But in my case, just, I can hack it. So that's probably an error, because I do see a material sense. So in which case, yeah. And it's just another category, and these things work together. You know, the joy and the misery, and they're not on a teeter-totter. So they both have a materiality, and I think both. Sometimes we need to stop and say, listen, can we really afford to go to the moon when, you know, we have these many people without health care, you know? But then there's other times we have to say, well, Jesus, we have a real problem in the inner city, and we need to do something. But maybe inspiring them with the space program. In fact, maybe we can build the space centers in the inner city and start to have an influence. Shoot rockets to the moon. Okay, yeah, not really, literally that, but you can try to do something positive, and have it feed into economic stimulus and education to to the problems of your society that it would be irresponsible to ignore. But to be serious said this, and Gary says this, and I really don't like the idea of, well, just fix it first. Fix it first. Before you paint a picture and have fun, fix it first. And it's frustrating to me, because I am kind of a fix-it-first person. I mean, I'm often like, well, I'll fix this problem. I'm not so good at ignoring an emotional thing. I'm like, let's talk it out right now. And just in that metaphor, and yet I'm not fix-it-first, because, and I could think of examples where I'm not like that at all. But in social matters and stuff, it's like, how can you expect us? So we're not supposed to, build a park until we've solved every other problem that there could be. But, what if the problem stems from that, what if the park is good for people? Or maybe that's a bad example, because that's pretty non-controversial, though it's a little bit, but like going to the moon. Do we really have to not do that? I mean, see, I think we should stop war. But I don't think we can wait till we stop war to go to the moon. I think it's the other way around. I think once we realize, hey, we could spend billions on moon bases. We could be in that future. That science fiction future? We can afford that. We can afford 2010. That money goes one place. War. That's basically the root of all the money corruption. Of course, there's some other corruption. But see, people just getting wealthy, that money has to come back into the economy some way. It can take a long time, stuff like that. But when you do war, you're actually wasting all that resource, and then some. Then destroying some resource that wasn't wasted originally, making it a waste. But we don't wait.